Most people picture the time of Jesus as a purely spiritual world. Sandals, sermons, miracles, a moral story suspended outside history. But for the people who actually lived there, life was not shaped by theology. It was shaped by money, and the relentless absence of it. The world into which Jesus was born was one of the most economically unequal systems the ancient Mediterranean had ever seen. And that inequality was not accidental. It was engineered. Welcome to Money Historian, where money, power, and history collide, and where the past explains more about the present than we like to admit. Rome's extraction economy at the beginning of the 1st century, Judea existed inside the Roman Empire, not as a partner, not as a beneficiary, but as a resource colony. Rome did not conquer territories to develop them, it conquered them to fund the center. Wealth flowed in one direction, only grain, silver, labor, taxes from the provinces to Rome. Judea was one of those provinces, and it was fragile. This was a rural society. Most people lived on small plots of land, just large enough to survive. There was no margin, no cushion, no backup. A bad harvest didn't mean lower profits, it meant hunger. Rome did not adjust for that reality. Taxes without escape today. Taxes scale with income. In Roman Judea, taxes scaled with existence. Land tax, crop tax, head tax, market tolls, road tolls, religious taxes layered on top of imperial ones. Failure to pay had immediate consequences. There was no appeals process, no forgiveness, no relief. Tax collection was outsourced to local contractors, tax farmers, who paid Rome up front and then recovered their costs by extracting as much as possible from the population. Exploitation wasn't corruption. It was the incentive. Debt as a one-way door. When people couldn't pay, they borrowed. Debt was everywhere. But this wasn't modern debt. There was no bankruptcy, no restructuring, no reset. Interest accumulated fast. Land was collateral. One bad year could erase a family's future. A farmer borrows, the next harvest disappoints. Debt remains, land is seized. The former owner becomes a tenant on his own land, then a laborer, then nothing. This wasn't personal failure. It was system design. Over time, land consolidated into the hands of elites connected to Roman authority and temple leadership. Small farms vanished. Large estates expanded. The economy didn't just create poverty, it reproduced it. No safety net, no exit. There was no state protection. Lose your land, and you lost income, status, security, and identity. Family was the only safety net. Charity existed, but it could not absorb systemic collapse. Debt became social, psychological, permanent, and everyone understood this. People were not poor because they were lazy or immoral. They were poor because the system required them to be. A society under pressure, this produced constant tension. Judea was unstable. Rebellions flared repeatedly. Banditry was not just crime, it was economic desperation. Movements promising relief spread quickly. Messianic ideas don't emerge in comfort, they emerge in crisis. When words meant survival, when people heard teachings about forgiveness, release, and justice, they weren't hearing metaphors, they were hearing economic survival. Forgiveness meant debt cancellation. Release meant escape from obligation. The poor were not abstract, they were everyone. The temple, sacred and financial, the temple in Jerusalem is often imagined as purely religious. In reality, it was one of the most powerful financial institutions in the region. It functioned as a religious authority, a treasury, a tax system, and a court. Every adult Jewish male paid an annual temple tax in a specific silver coin. Local currency was rejected. Roman coins were rejected. Money had to be exchanged. Money changers handled it for a fee. Animals for sacrifice were sold at approved prices. Access to holiness required payment. Religion did not replace Roman extraction, it was stacked on top of it. A crisis of legitimacy. Temple elites were deeply intertwined with Roman power. High priests were politically approved. Order mattered more than justice. So the institution, claiming moral authority, also benefited from the same extraction system that impoverished the people, and resentment grew. Not against faith, but against hypocrisy. Why Jesus became a threat. Jesus didn't speak outside this system. He spoke directly into it. Debt, labor, wages, stewards, masters. These weren't random metaphors. They were daily life. When he spoke of the kingdom of God, people heard an alternative order, one where the existing system was not final. And then came the moment power could not ignore. The temple disruption when Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers. It wasn't symbolic anger. It was economic confrontation. He wasn't attacking prayer, he was attacking the monetization of the sacred. Calling it a den of robbers was a direct accusation. And that crossed a line. Rome tolerated prophets, it tolerated teachers, it did not tolerate instability, suppression, and aftermath. Within decades, Judea exploded into revolt. In 70 CE, Jerusalem was destroyed. The temple was dismantled, its treasury looted, its leadership erased. Rome intensified control. Extraction didn't end. It became more bureaucratic, more distant, more absolute. Rome won militarily. The deeper victory, but Rome never fully reclaimed legitimacy. Jesus didn't challenge Rome's armies. He challenged the moral logic that made suffering feel necessary. By separating debt from moral failure, by offering forgiveness outside institutional payment, by placing the poor at the center, he weakened something empires depend on as much as force: belief. The money historian lesson: economic systems don't collapse because they are unjust. They collapse when the stories that justify them stop working. Rome optimized extraction, but it never repaired the moral breach beneath it. History doesn't repeat, it reveals patterns, and once you see how money and power defend themselves with stories, you'll never hear those stories the same way again. This is Money Historian. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History has answers. I'll show you where to look.